Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. I'm Yetta Decker, and today I have two special guests with me today. I have Laura Booker to my far right. She's sitting in my chair, if you haven't already noticed. And Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Well, thank you for the invite, Yetta. My name is Laura Booker. I run a project management, business development, marketing consulting firm, and I specialize in helping entrepreneurs, corporate, and sales teams excel in sharing their message with word-of-mouth strategies. So really communicating with people and being able to market themselves. And so what I found is there's more than just 4 P's in marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. There's also a 5th P, and it's people. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today is the model of human behavior and how you can maximize your revenue, bottom line, your return on investment by mastering the communication of working with people.
And what I think is interesting about the whole people piece, for those of you that are watching and listening right now, if you don't have a business or you're not an entrepreneur, the people piece is just as prevalent, maybe even more prevalent in our families and in our personal life.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to add the 6th P, personal.
Sure.
Personal life.
We're going to
Is
get
that
into
fair?
that. I'm going to reference relationships, parenting, teaching,
That's 7.
church community. Oh, there's so many.
There's so many P's out there,
We're going
right?
to get into it for sure.
Perfect. And so stay tuned if you want to have some insights into how to even be better in relationships as a parent
Oh, yeah.
and
definitely.
as a partner.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Lots of P words. You're just coming out with them. Good. All right.
Think on my feet. This is good. And I also have an extra special guest with me. You probably have noticed up to this point that Linda Fuzzi, who is one of our team members, welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Yetta.
She is ecstatic to be here sharing who she is. And you'll also notice that it's not as comfortable for Linda. She likes that it's taken me 2 or 3 minutes before I introduced her, whereas Laura was happy I started straight with her. Mm-hmm. And why is that, Laura?
Well, let's just maybe go into a little bit so we can understand the human behavior model a little bit, and then we'll start all speaking the same language, because it's all about what we call, and it's represented in the human behavior by a circle. So if we were to take the human behavior model and put it into a circle like this, we're going to look and ask yourself about the motor of activity. If you were the type of person who you feel are more outgoing and active, and let me give you a few different words that might describe that for you, okay? So if you feel that you're somebody who's fast-paced, optimistic, involved, positive, enthusiastic.
Yay!
That's you? Is that you? Okay.
I was being reserved.
Oh, you were trying to,
for a minute
I see.
To see if I could trick you.
Never. You would probably find yourself more in the outgoing and active quadrant here.
Would all my
section.
listeners and viewers agree?
Yes. Now let's just give you a few words that describe reserve and passive. So if we go into slow pace, cautious, concern, reluctant, discerning, or critical thinking, that is more of a reserved and passive style. So in your motor of activity, whenever you action something, do you feel that you're more of an outgoing and active type of person or a more reserved and passive? So Yetta, we already know right away you've already
Well, because I can't help myself,
right.
can I?
Outgoing. And for you, Linda, what would you say relates more for you?
I'm definitely more on the reserved side. However, depending on the situation, I can fluctuate in between the two. So it depends. I think depending on the role, too, within my professional realm, I think the reserved and passive, cautious, critical thinking plays more of a factor. When I'm with my children or in more of a social environment, I probably am a bit more comfortable being a bit more outgoing. So.
Okay, great. And so,
And what are you demonstrating so far today?
right now,
Just being a good sport. But I feel on the reserved side.
a little bit more on the reserve. So Again, I'll go over this once I've done all 4 areas, but we are, like you said, a little bit of everything. We're a combination of all these. So you're going to hear a few of these words that I give you coming out in all areas. You're just like, oh, a couple of those are me, or, oh, that sounds like me too. What you want to do is your first instinct. So for instance, when you're walking down the sidewalk, I remember I went on a trip to Spain, for instance, and I was like weaving in and out of all these people all walking down. I'm like, in my head, I literally thought, how do people get anywhere? Like they're, like I'm like a bull in a china shop, the blinders are on, or a racehorse, right? You just go, go, go. Versus, are you the type of person who would take the same route to work and just kind of, steady.
Enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah,
Slow
enjoy,
it down a little
smell
bit.
the flowers a little
Yeah.
bit, that type of thing. So when we're doing, again, the outgoing is fast-paced, optimistic, energetic, involved, positive, enthusiastic. The reserved, motor of activity area, slow-paced, cautious, concerned, reluctant, discerning, and critical thinking. So just keep a few of those words in mind as you identify whether you feel that you're more outgoing or reserved. Okay? The next area in the model of human behavior is we're going to divide the circle in half vertically this way, and this is going to be the compass of activity. So as far as 2 different areas, we have the high tech, the task side, and then we have the high touch, the people side. Okay, so let's just go through the task, high tech area. And a few words to describe that section would be form, function, programs, plan, project, and process. Any of those words relate to either of you?
As a secondary,
Yes, yeah.
not
yeah.
as a primary.
Okay.
What
And-
about you, Linda?
I agree. People comes first. Yeah.
All right, and so the people high touch area, if we look at words that relate to the high touch people, relationships, caring, sharing, emotions, feelings, and friendships. Which side relates most with either of you?
Definitely people quadrant.
Yeah, I
people
would say the
quadrant?
people quadrant. And in my career, I know I have to be very task oriented.
Right.
And so therefore, you're going to do what you have to do to make sure that the structures are great.
That's right.
So you understand them all, just not my go-to.
Right. So when we're looking at, again, the quadrant, we have the outgoing and the reserved, and then we have the task, high touch, and the people, high touch. So for instance, myself, I'll give an example of myself. For me, I'm a very outgoing, high-paced individual, and I'm very people-oriented. So for me, when we look at the model of human behavior, which we identify with 4 letters, D, I, S, and C, you'll be able to look at the quadrant when it's divided in, the circle when it's divided in quarters. And since I am in the outgoing half of the circle, and then the people-oriented, I follow more in the I quadrant. Okay? And for you, Yetta, which area did you say that you...
Well, mine's a little interesting, so I don't want to confuse everybody as they're watching today, and yet every time I do this, and I have also become certified in this methodology, just like Laura has, I find there's always a primary and a secondary.
Right. So let's go with your primary first.
Well,
You
that
don't
would be
wanna-
the far,
up
there we
here,
go.
because you find that you're much outgoing,
right?
because that's the first thing that comes to you,
Right.
and then you're mostly task-oriented.
Because it's about getting it done.
It's
so
about
it's not
getting
about
it
the
done
detail
and
of
the
it.
doing.
It's about the doing of it.
Yes, so let's go over that, okay? So the D, the outgoing, the task-oriented. Let me say a few words that relate to the D quadrant, okay? Dominant, direct, demanding, decisive, determined, doer.
You would not say that about me.
Go, go, go. Are you an active?
Of course.
of
That
you-
is exactly what
Yeah.
you would say. And a little bit sarcastic from time to time. How's that, Laura?
Well, in one of the really interesting aspects about the D personality style, or the people who lead with this characteristic, is these are the ones that they kind of joke make the world turn. Because they're such doers, they're go, go, go on the go. There are CEOs, there are presidents and organizing. There are politicians, all the people who are kind of in leadership roles. I could probably give you a couple examples, actually, of celebrity-type personalities that you might relate to. See if any of these people come to mind. Clint Eastwood, Helen Keller, Wayne Gretzky, Harriet Olsen, Judge Judy. You've heard of her, right?
I certainly have.
Dr. Phil, Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
They're doers, right?
Yeah, they're absolutely
they're all
doers.
those types of personalities. So we need to have the Ds, and the Ds actually take up about 10% of the population.
That's why I can be myself
That's right.
and upset 90% of the population.
But you know what the power of having this information and knowing about it is that once you know it, you're able to empower yourself to improve your communications. Let's get through all the 4 areas, and then we'll get on to some areas of how you can master this type of information in parenting, in teaching, in your community.
And in your career.
As your career as a professional as well. So let's go over to the I quadrant. So a few of the words that define the I area are inspiring, influencing, interactive, impressive, interested in people. So these people, and we use all kinds of I words to really show how these individuals are a lot of times, the ones that stand out in a crowd, let's just say.
They like turquoise.
Exactly, and you know what?
They like bright
I was
colors.
laughing a little bit when I put this on, is because that, they will be the people that wear the funky socks, or, they have the wild hair, or, they want to be able to have a uniqueness about them in some way. So I laugh a little bit, but
I did too when I saw you come today.
there's
That's
a few
perfect.
of the C area that we'll get into later that kind of are like, really, that color is not needed. It's not necessary, but we'll just stick with it. I absolutely love it.
I think it's beautiful too, Laura.
Great. So let's get into the S quadrant down here and give a few words that go with this style of. So supportive, stable, steady, sweet, status quo, and shy. Do any of those words relate to you a little bit? At times? Yes. The percentage of the population that take up the S quadrant is about 30 to 35%. And we say that the S style of personality are the key and the most valuable employees you could have in an organization, because they're the ones who will make seamless communication and minimize conflict. They're the ones that will really are the glue that will hold your organization together. So it's really important to make sure that the S's are happy and that the D's aren't stomping on them too hard or, running them over, because the S will really work very well with the I, influencing, your sales teams, with your management, as well as all your analytical staff there as well. So the S is a very important characteristic to have, Linda. Thank you so much for coming and representing that quadrant for us today.
And now, in terms of the population base that would lead, so we're not a thing at all or a letter, it's just we lead with that personality temperament, right?
I'm going to get into
so
that.
So with the I's, what percentage of the population would lead with I?
The percentage for the I is about 25 to 30%.
Right.
So we have a 10%, 25 to 30, and a 30 to 35% here.
Yeah. That's pretty neat.
It is, yeah.
If you're just joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team, we are just barely scratching the surface of understanding personality styles. And Laura Booker's our special guest today, as well as Linda Fuzzi. And so you'll want to go back and watch the first half, and you're going to want to watch every show that we do on this topic, because you'll need all of it to get a really good understanding of how to just interact beautifully and most effectively with all the people in your life, regardless of what personality bent they come at life with. So you'll want to go back and watch that and stay with us on the Inside Track on Real Estate. Okay, Laura, we're moving into the C.
The C,
we're missing a fourth person here.
The fourth quadrant is the C quadrant, and I'm going to use a few words here. Cautious, calculating, conscientious, contemplative, careful. These are the type of people in your organization, for instance, or in your family who are the analytical folks. They're the ones that go to Excel for everything. They're the ones that are the fact finders. They're the ones that will do research. Every word that comes out of their mouth, you want to make sure that you listen, because it is thought out very carefully and very precisely before it's
And they're
said.
intelligent.
Oh, very, very.
Yeah.
Not that not the other characteristics aren't intelligent, but this is the type of, they're reserved, they're very task oriented, and they're very calculating. So
And they don't tend to speak before they think.
that's right. Like,
So that's why
unlike the I type of personality, which will just blurt out and, come back a little bit later. But, a CD type personality is the great type of personality that you'd want, for instance, as a surgeon. Someone who's very calculated, who's very determined, and has thought out the process specifically. No one else that I'd rather have, operating on me, for instance, right?
Absolutely.
So in conclusion, as far as the different types of the personalities, just keep in mind that when you're evaluating yourself or your own personality, you might want to look at, are you outgoing or are you reserved? And that will put you in the upper quadrant or the lower. Then are you task-oriented or people-oriented? And that'll put you on either side. And all that does is identifies the type of personality style that you lead with, like you were saying, Yetta. So for instance, myself, outgoing, and people, I lead with an I. But let's just say that the D is not very far behind. As I told you before, I'm a very task-oriented person. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a project manager. I love projects and tasks. And so what happens is I lead my personality with a very high ID style blend. And for instance, Linda, you were telling me a couple of the words that I was saying earlier on in the outgoing category related to you. So explain to me, you said that mostly you probably lead with an S.
Oh, definitely.
And then what characteristics come to you secondary?
I believe task-oriented, as well as I think some of the I fit into as well.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, yeah, I'm overwhelmingly supportive, I think.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly
supportive. I love that. Great. Well, you're a great person to have on the show with us today, because we feel your support like none other. That's great. And for you,
Isn't that
Yetta?
incredible?
Yes.
Clearly lead with the D quadrant. And then my secondary actually swings down into the S.
Okay, so that's very interesting. And that will be a very interesting conversation we can have about opposites attract in a minute. So tell me a little bit about that. So you feel that you're outgoing and you're task-oriented, so that you lead with a D.
Yeah.
Then what?
And then I'm concerned about how you feel.
Oh.
So as an example today,
Yes.
I always sit on the right-hand side for 190 shows, my friend.
Wow.
And right away, I could sense that that was where you needed to be able to have a good position.
Okay.
And so rather than just choosing what works for me and where my comfort level is, I would automatically go to, well, clearly that's where you need to be, because I want to support you in having a great experience and being able to provide great information to those listening.
Wonderful.
I want to support you and I want to support them. So it's just a natural, and I didn't tell you before. I told you after you were sitting there.
Well, I know. If
Right?
we could have been videotaping the before show, this was absolutely canning on all the different information that was coming out with regards to this, because not only were you very respectful in giving me this seat, on my way here, an hour drive, my eye kicked into gear of influencing. Now, I know that Yetta's a D, which also I have a little bit of a D. Yeah. Now, how am I going to convince her that I need to be sitting in this particular seat because I'm right-handed and I'm going to be using the flip chart? Isn't that hilarious? How
it is.
And so what the power of that is once you understand, not yourself and how you communicate, you can then empower and use this tool to recognize it in other people. So for instance, when I would meet Linda, right away I'd start a conversation and start communicating. I would automatically see, you know, is she competing or, you know, jiving with me in personality style and keeping up with the pace? No, not as much. So she's more on the reserve side of things. And then as our conversation goes, you know, is she more task oriented? You know, is she like on deadline? Is she trying to keep to a schedule, or is she very interactive as a people? And so I can kind of determine by just doing those two quick questions, is she more outgoing or reserved, task or people? And then I can see where she leads with in what quadrant, and then see how she relates to me. You know, is she like I am, and we're going to compete for conversation and the highlight?
Clearly not, Laura.
Obviously not, right? Or do I have to slow down? Do I have to actually, in my head, okay, you know what? I'm going to give Linda a chance to talk now, you know, to keep that conversation going. And for instance, you were talking about the two quadrants that are opposite. Let's talk about relationships and how sometimes people attract
Opposites?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of that before?
Absolutely. And I don't know if anybody's noticed that we're missing a representative of the C quadrant.
What happened there?
Well, what do you think he's doing? And who do you think he is?
That wouldn't be Ken, would it?
I think it might be. And so he leads with the C quadrant.
Okay.
And so he's busy preparing graphs and charts and statistics so that we can talk about the market update.
Oh my goodness, isn't that wonderful? I mean, that couldn't be more perfect and as an example.
And it wasn't planned. It was actually planned that he was going to be on the show with us.
That's right. So we could each have a D, an S, an I, and a C. Yeah.
And yet the statistics needed to get handled with a little more detail than they were. They were already done. They just weren't done quite as accurately and with as much precision as he would like. So we decided not to have him on the show, and then it fit in perfectly.
Oh my goodness!
To the conversation.
It's definitely true that, you know, in relationships we go and attract that opposite personality. Why? Because it's a little bit different from what our everyday is, and we find it inspiring, or it's, you know, it's different in that at the beginning, you know, that honeymoon stage. But at some point in the future, sometimes people find that they start getting frustrated, and that the communication lines get pulled a little bit here and there. But with knowing about this information, so for instance, I'm a high I. I often date, and I'm with high Cs, which for me is very, very frustrating when everything is presented in structure, form, schedule, you know, but we need that balance in order for us to operate in life. And what a beautiful thing. I mean, God made us all different, right? So that's, you know, could you imagine if we had a whole world of Donald Trumps?
No.
Like, it wouldn't function,
or
right?
Or a world of Yetta Deckers. It would be a scary place. Not good.
Right?
So lots would get done, but it would not be a lot of fun.
So that's one of the beautiful things about, you know, understanding your own personality and the style that you have, leading with it, and being responsible for it and recognizing it in others. I really like to be able to share a little bit about parenting and teaching, if I may.
Yeah, what I wouldn't mind saying before we move on to that, because we've got so much information to share, the fascinating part when you talk about opposites attract, Ken's secondary, you would normally expect was either D or S, because we tend to go next to, right? Our primary tends to be beside our, secondaries tend to be beside our primary, and yet because I do kind of the DS gig, Ken does CI.
Oh, very, very interesting. Yeah.
And so together we're one human being, one complete human being. Kind of interesting how that flows.
It is interesting, and as we get older and we understand a little bit about developing our communication skills, because you know probably there might have been a little bit more conflict, or your feelings might have gotten hurt a lot more when you were younger. As we get older, we learn how to take in, or you know, not take things too personally. Like the S quadrant might take a lot of things more personally than
that true,
than
Linda?
they should.
Probably more emotional. However, like you're saying, Laura, I think that as you age, you tend to become a more balanced person, and you identify with each quadrant, and you try to balance your lifestyle so that you become whole in yourself.
Yeah, exactly. For instance, you know, I at one point dated an I. So I'm an I, but I had dated somebody who was an I, like
Off the
all
chart
I,
I, yeah.
like off the chart I. So what happened in that scenario? Their analytical and structure and all that wasn't there very, very much. But because I knew this model, my C had to raise so that there could be some balance. And what a beautiful thing, because that's what we often say is our strengths and our power of who we are lie in our weakest trait. So for instance, I'm a high a high ID, and my skills and strengths lie in the C and the S quadrant.
So we're really a blend of all four. It's just how do we demonstrate them and how do we put them out there?
That's right. And how do we communicate with others? As a parent, for instance, as a high D, I have a little girl who's an S,
I do too.
right?
Yeah, and I have coworkers that are S's.
But you have an S in you. My S is
Right.
very, very low.
Right, which
Not that I'm
helps.
not a friendly person, or but the sensitivity thing. And my sister, she's a high S, and a lot of times she says to me, you're so direct and so very bossy. Sometimes she might call me, right? But as a parent and a teacher, it's very, very important to understand these models and understand these skills so that when we can recognize a student or a child who might be in the opposite quadrant, how can you empower them?
Right.
So as a child, my father, as a high ID, to get me to finish university, do you know what he did?
No.
I was coming up the stairs one day, and he was talking to a relative in the kitchen, and I stood on the stairs because I heard he was talking about me, and he said, you know what, that Laura, if she actually crosses the stage to get the diploma, I'll be surprised, right? And I heard him say that, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, oh yeah, I'm going to show him. I remember I was in my early 20s or something. I said, oh yeah, watch this. And 4 years later, I walked across that stage, got to my diploma, and the first thing I did, I came off the stage, I went right to my dad, and I hugged him, and I said, see, Dad, I knew I could do it. And remember that time that you said that you didn't think I could do it? I was around the corner, and I heard you say that. He goes, honey, I know you did. That's why I said it. Because he did. What did he do, right? He challenged me, right, to get me to get into action. So it was even getting your children to bed or, relating different things like that. So working with different people and understanding the personality styles in teaching and
So we
parenting
want
is really
you all-
important.
I'm going to cut you off, Laura, because I have to.
Oh,
Because we've used our time
okay.
and then some. So you're going to have to come back to watch another show, and you don't even get a property feature this month. So this is
Oh my
this
goodness.
episode. So thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team, and you'll want to join us again to learn more about personality styles, and you have watched them alive and well on the Inside Track on Real Estate. Thanks, Laura. Thanks,
Thank
Linda.
you.